Hello, and thank you for joining us on Vermont Film Essentials. My name is David Metzger.
I'm Lincoln L. Hayes. This week we are discussing John Huston's The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, starring the great Humphrey Bogart. Thanks for throwing this one on the schedule. This was a lot of fun. I like this one a lot because it's not a Western, but it's a treasure hunting movie. But it's not about treasure either.
Right.
That's a MacGuffin. John Huston likes his MacGuffins, doesn't he?
Yes, he does.
Also, I was really excited to read that the character of Dobbs was an inspiration for the look of Indiana Jones. Which I was like, yeah, I see that. Very cool.
Did you see this thing they released, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago now, but the original treatment from Lawrence Kasdan for Raiders of the Lost Ark.
No.
With like notes from George Lucas, and it's like a transcript
Wow.
of him sitting down, hitting record, and just spitballing the story.
Oh, that's amazing.
But at one point, Steven Spielberg is like, I want him to be, I don't want him to be a traditional hero. I want him to have a little bit of, Humphrey Bogart from Treasure of the Sierra Madre or Casablanca in there. And you totally see that.
Yeah. I'm like, all right, we'll give him a fedora. Boom, done. Yeah, this was really exciting and interesting, and there's so much about paranoia and guilt and just general fear, and our protagonist ends up being the bad guy. It's very fascinating film.
Yeah. By way of Steven Spielberg, because when they did the AFI Top 100, they did like a TV broadcast, and they had all these interviews from filmmakers and actors and actresses talking about the films as they went down the list. And I remember during this film and during The Bridge on the River Kwai, they cut to Spielberg, and he's just like, I learned everything about how to structure a film and how to make a screenplay work by watching these two films. And so like a good little doobie, I went out and I watched both of them. And this one, like a film like The Godfather or, Citizen Kane, like some movies are just about America, about the dark side of America.
Yeah.
And this is one of those films. It's really odd. I remember when I watched it, I was just struck by, one, it just felt like they just ran out and just shot it.
Yeah.
And he did, like he went to the actual locations, because that's what John Huston does. But also, there's just no BS about the movie.
Right.
Like, it's just very, like, cut right to the point, right to the bone of the dark side of American nature.
Yeah.
With the greed and the paranoia and the rivalry, and the fact that back in 1948,
Sounds right.
we're basically watching the disintegration of a film character.
Yeah.
Right before our eyes.
Right. Not only a film character, Humphrey Bogart, which is a big deal. You didn't see that much, especially from the big studios, of being like, we're going to take our main guy, our bread and butter right now, and let him be a scoundrel, and let him just, obviously spoilers, when his character dies, and it's not the end of the story, it's almost like, whoa, wait a second, I actually had to go back and was like, that just happened, right? I didn't miss something. He's not going to get away or get up. No, he's killed. Yeah. And then it's the other two characters' story from then on. You're like, whoa. Also for Bogart to be on board with that and be like, yeah, kill me off. You don't see that much.
And I think he just, this is why I love John Huston, is because above everything, above being a wonderful filmmaker, he's a writer at heart.
Yeah.
And I think Bogart just saw the script and he's like, this is so strong. Like, if I have any problems with this, or if I, use my ego to change this in any way, I'm doing a disservice to this great writer.
Yeah.
And yeah, like again, spoilers, but the way he's killed off is even unassuming. Like, it's just, it just happens like that. Has no BS. There's no music. There's no, grand death scene that he's given. It's just, boom, you're done. And yeah, you have to think, you're like, whoa. And I remember when No Country for Old Men came out and it did that, it was a big deal.
Yeah.
And here it is in 1948, and they're doing it.
I also thought of Burn After Reading. Brad Pitt's, like top build, third build, whatever in this movie.
Yep.
And then just, he's gone.
Boom.
You're like, whoa, wait a second, you just killed Brad Pitt? Who's leading this movie now?
Right.
And that was my thought watching this too. I was like, well, hang on, what? How do we finish this story? And it finishes perfectly. And the fact that the gold means nothing. What they've done together means almost nothing. Because these two guys, Howard and Curtis, are not going to stay together. It's not like this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. It's, well, I'm going to go do my thing, you go do your thing. And in the end, they kind of get what they wanted without getting, it's not the right means to an end. Like they have the scene where they're talking about what they want to do with the money when they, get all this done. And Curtis says that he wants to go be a fruit farmer because he just thinks that sounds beautiful. He's like, well, now you can go do that. Yeah. You don't have thousands of dollars, but you can go do it if you want. Yeah.
It's one of those great movie endings of just, one, it's dark because it was all for nothing.
Yeah.
But it also, like them, you just want to laugh because,
you spent 10 months,
journey.
10 months doing
this.
this.
Back to where we started.
Yeah.
And there's also there's a little bit of a hope that it's like at least we got to the end of this journey intact, and we can recognize that we didn't go by way of Bogart.
Yeah.
Like that we had the strength of character to know, we can't go this far.
Right.
And let the worst sides of our nature get the best of us.
Right.
From a writing standpoint, just a couple things I just wanted to make notice of. We talked about this before with Stagecoach, how, you can tell a story so economically. And right from the jump, those little moments, those 3 moments where he asked the same guy for money, who, by the way, is John Huston. But he asked that guy for money. So you get that he's destitute, that he's desperate, that he needs everything that he can get. So the one scene is that him and Curtains, love that name. Him and Curtains, so they bond together, they form a friendship, they take this job from this guy, and then walk into a bar. Hey, does that guy owe you money? Well, guess what? He owes money to everyone around here. He swindles everybody. But then they see him go into a bar.
Yeah.
And the fight that they get into, it's one of, for 1948, one of the most brutal fights ever. And
it goes on for a while.
It's messy.
Yeah.
There's no choreography about it. It's just, obviously, you know that they choreographed it, but there's just a messiness to it that it just happens. But that he's so desperate that he will beat the crap out of a guy just to get what he deserves in his money.
Right.
Then we cut to the scene.
But also, he doesn't just rob him.
Right.
He takes what's owed.
Right, and he throws the rest back, right?
Then it's just a decline of his moral character from then on out, because he sees all this money in the guy's wallet, and I was like, wow, is he just going to flat out rob this dude? But he's like, nope, this is what is for me, this is what's for you, and then he pays the bar.
Right.
And throws the rest in his face.
And that is that's like a little mile marker for his character, right?
Yeah.
Sure, you're like, oh,
he's down and out, but he's not deplorable.
He just wants, the justice for him
Right.
and his friend. And then they're in the camp and they meet Walter Huston. He's a great character. But he says, right out at the beginning of the movie, he's like, I've seen what gold does to a man's soul. And that's everything. That's the theme of the movie right there. And then by luck, he gets this ticket from this little boy, and the little boy comes over and he starts bothering him, and he's just like, get out of here, and he throws the thing in his face. But then, no, you won.
Yeah.
And there's this moment where Bogart he changes so he, get out of here, don't leave me alone, and then I won. And just the pride that he takes, look at this, look, I got the winning ticket. So that says something about his character.
Yep.
And then he's like, you know what, I'm going to share this with you. Like, we've got the money to go and get the gold now. We can
Right.
do this. So that says something about his character. But then once they make the pact, you know, Walter Houston's going to join them because he knows everything about it.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this moment where they shake hands, and then it just kind of pushes in on Walter Houston's face, watching them like curiously as
Mm-hmm.
they shake hands, because he just knows what's going to happen. And it's just one of those beautiful like screenwriting, filmmaking moments of I just told the whole story within just one frame.
Mm-hmm.
It's awesome.
So great. One of the things that I really liked about the film was that none of the Spanish is subtitled. So we are just a fly on the wall watching all this go down, and if you know Spanish, you're going to get it. If you don't know Spanish, you're just lost. You're just watching it. What does it all mean? You're relying on Howard to translate everything for you. And fun fact about that, he didn't speak any Spanish. John Huston had a Mexican on the set record all of his lines for him, and then he just had him listen to it and memorize it over and over again. And if you're keen in your listening of his Spanish, you can tell that he's not speaking Spanish. He is just saying lines. His pronunciation is not great, and he says it all too fast for the words to have any meaning, which I just thought was kind of adorable, that they're like, oh yeah, he doesn't actually speak Spanish, but watch him speak Spanish though. And I actually went into the settings on my computer to see if there were subtitles, and there weren't any subtitles. And then in the next scene, it was right before the bandits go to the firing squad. And then as soon as they start speaking English, it was subtitled. And I was like, oh, there it is. So it's an intentional thing. I thought that was really neat.
You get, again, it being a no BS movie, like you get just how hard it is to be in Mexico and to look for and dig for gold.
Yeah.
And to be a prospector. The scene that comes to mind is, so Bogart is very suspicious, getting suspicious of Curtin, and he thinks he's moving his money and hiding it underneath the rock. But he's like, no, there's a Gila monster that just went underneath that rock. And he's like, just, reach your hand in there. And then he talks
Prove me wrong.
And he talks about how when a Gila monster clenches on something, you can't.
It doesn't let go. You can cut it in half and the head will hang on. But by then you'll be dead, so what do you care?
So there's just you can, I could see John Huston just learning that little tidbit on going on a hike or something, and being like, oh, that's perfect. I know how to use that. Yeah. The fact that you're in this land, and then there's these bandits that are just coming, and if they come, you gotta,
there's nothing
it's
you can
us
do.
or them. You got to fight for your life.
Yeah.
You just get the sense of the life and death struggles of being one of these three characters.
Yeah. That and how hot it had to be. Oh man, we have the scene at the beginning when the guy who ends up swindling them, they come down off the tower, and all of them are just sweat marks for days, and you're just like, oh, that looks awful. And he's like, it's 120 degrees in the shade, and there ain't no shade up there. Yeah. Oof, no, thank you. Also, this is one of the first films to be shot outside the United States, which that's insane to me. It's like, really?
Yep.
Kind of like Jaws, the first film to ever be shot in the Atlantic. How has no one done that before?
Right. And then, if we flash back to our first episode when we did The African Queen, also by John Huston, same thing, the first movie to be shot in the Amazon, to go to the actual Amazon jungle in the river and shoot there. He wanted, you get that he wanted that level of accuracy, and that it does add something to the movie, and you do feel it when you're watching it. You feel
it certainly doesn't feel like a soundstage, like John Wayne Western of if anybody stumbles backwards, they're going to knock the wall down and you're going to lose your landscape. Right. It felt real. There were two moments that the realism of the location hit me, where when they're having the gunfight with the bandits and then Bogart army crawls out, and my first thought was, if that were me, I would have hit both my elbows, my knees, everything on every rock, and it would have just been I would have had to be cut, can we stop? I just hurt everything. And then when the villagers come back to take Howard back because they owe him hospitality, and the horses are running across those rocks, I was like, oh, those poor horses. They could very easily just whoop, and then broken leg,
Right.
bam,
Right.
Dunsky.
One of the other things about this film is you get that there's a certain delight that John Huston and Humphrey Bogart are taking in showing this character for all of his warts and all. Like there's something like you feel bad, but it's like he's so funny.
Yeah.
He's so funny how paranoid he is.
Yeah.
You know, the scene when the guy that he meets back in town, and
Cody.
then all of a sudden he's on his trail, and then he just shows up at the camp. And the way, like, you know, Bogart is trying to be so, you know, just abrasive and, you know, get out of here, you don't need to be here. And then he sits down and he's going to take the food, and it's like, sure, have some food. We're not going to let you starve to death, but after you're done with that food, you're going to get out of here. And even like it's just the way he stands, like he's just frozen in this, like this awful, like contorted position. But it's just, he's just so funny. And even towards the end when it's like, you know, what happened to his body? The tiger. Oh yeah, the tiger got him, that's right.
His descent into madness is funny, but also watching it, you're like, that had to be so much fun to be Bogart, because he doesn't play characters like this. And it's, you know, it's like when somebody does a turn on Broadway, or they, you know, do a TV show, or they're, you know, the villain in a film and they've always been the good guy. You're like, that's fun. It's fun for an actor, and especially playing villains is so much more fun than playing the good guy. Because think about like Batman. Who's interesting in Batman? The villains.
Right.
All of the villains are so much more interesting than Batman.
And they get the most backstory.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like after every take, Bogart is just like, oh my God, thank you, John.
That was so fun.
Much.
Can we do it again? I love that.
So you know how much of a Paul Thomas Anderson fan that I am.
I do.
So when he did There Will Be Blood, he said that, you know, he stumbled onto this movie and he had seen it before and liked it and never really kind of thought twice about it.
Right.
But while he's writing this movie, he watches it and he's just like, oh my God, everything that I want to say in this movie, it's already said.
Yeah.
You know, he kind of fell in love with this movie, and you know, he's the one that said that, you know, the greatest thing about this movie is within a half an hour they get the gold.
Yeah.
And it's all about what happens when you get the gold. It's
Right.
not about the journey to get it. And that he wanted to kind of steal a little bit of that, but also that he's just like, you know, it's one of the greatest films about the worst things inside of us.
Yeah.
And it's about all of that, like the greed, the pettiness, the pride, the competitiveness. It's just all there.
I'm trying to pinpoint other examples of this like story archetype, because I know they're all there, of like, we have this job to do, we get the job done, and then after that it's just the paranoia about getting caught from that job again. I guess there's a little bit of it in Baby Driver even. That's like the most recent one I can think of, but that's such a good point that this is about the treasure of the Sierra Madre, and they get it. Like, goal accomplished. Movie over. No, it's not about that. It's not about actually getting home with the gold. It's like, what's that gold going to do to you while it's burning a hole in your pocket?
And there's also, like, there's this moment where, you know, they get it, and then they got it on these great things, these little scales where they're measuring each portion. And you get the idea of, it's like, well, how much more is there?
Yeah.
Like, could we even get more of this stuff if we just stay here?
Right.
And then there's the journey back. It's like, yeah, we've journeyed all this way just to get the gold, but then we've got to journey back.
We got to get it down the mountain still.
And we got to survive that.
Yeah. Probably my favorite moment in the film was when they are panhandling and they're seeing that their take each day is getting less and less, and they just agree, all right, well, let's just call it and we'll get out of here. And Howard's like, well, it's going to be at least a week or more to put the mountain back. And he's like, what are you talking about? He's like, we've wounded this mountain. We can't leave it like this.
Right.
And that, idea, that sentiment. And then the very next scene, when they've got it all packed up and they're leaving, he thanks the mountain. He says, "Thank you for what you've given us." And they're all like, "Yeah, thanks, mountain." And they're kind of like sarcastic about it. But then Curtins seems genuine about it too.
Right.
Dobbs is just like, "Meh, whatever. That's crazy to thank a mountain." But then Curtins is almost like, "Yeah, actually, thanks. Thank you." I thought that both of those moments were really, really beautiful.
And you see the distinction between each character. You know, we started off by talking about Steven Spielberg, and you know, in Jaws, you get that.
Yeah.
You get these three great, distinct characters. So of course he thought about that.
Of course.
And you know, you do like you get like two ends of the spectrum between Dobbs and Curtin, and then Walter Huston is right there in the middle of it, and he's got this very spiritual side of him that is not shared by either of them.
Right.
But one understands it, and the other one sees it
Actively
as a necessity.
rebels
The
against
other
it.
one rebels against it.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And all the stuff with like the natives and then him becoming a medicine man, I thought that was all just perfect. Yeah, it was incredibly enjoyable. There's action. I mean, the train scene, for one, where they have the gunfight with the bandits.
Yeah.
That was so fun and unexpected. It's just like, all right, let's have a shootout. And they're like, "Did you see that one? I got that one." And it's, you know, it's like a boyhood fantasy of like, protect the train from the bandits kind of situation.
There's such a, you know, this is why I love movies from this time, because at the end of the day, they know that they want to make something entertaining.
Right.
So again, like we talked about this with The Searchers, it's like I'll give you all the stuff that you want. It'll be a very entertaining movie, but there will also be these morals and these questions and this weight to it, and that they were able to do. That you're able to have a movie that gets this deep and dark, but on top of it, it's like there's this train sequence where there's a shootout between the bandits, and it's amazing, and it's very entertaining. He, along with like Howard Hawks or John Ford, just knew how to entertain first, educate second, but one is not more important than the other. They can coexist.
Yeah. I also appreciated, even though he's, you know, relatively small character, the character of Cody, because he meets Curtins in the town when he's getting supplies and all that stuff, and you get the impression that he's going to try to either take his stuff, follow him up and take what they've got, or what have you, and you don't know how to take him. You don't know what to do with him. Is he good? Is he evil? And then when he follows him back to the camp, you're like, well, this is clearly, he's got strong motivations to do what he's doing. And then, you know, Booker punches him, and they agree that they're going to let him stay on. But then the bandits show up, and looking through his personal effects, they find that he's a father, and, you know, his family's like, "When are you coming home?" and all that other stuff. So it really completes the picture of this character we didn't even get to know.
Right.
But you feel like you should have known him, and you should have the compassion for him. And that's why I love the Curtins. It's like, we should give him a quarter of what we make, because that's what we would have done if we would have brought him on as a partner.
Right.
Bogart, of course, is selfish, and he's like, "No way." And Howard says, "Well, I don't care. That works for me."
You almost like that character of Cody is almost a way for you to put yourself in the mind of the three characters, and you can see, like, you know, the part of you that is suspicious of this character is the Bogart, and the part of you that's like, well, you know, he's just trying
Let's
to
give
do
him a
what
chance. Yeah.
And that I mean, that scene that follows when he's like, you know, you've either got two choices: either you can kill me off, or you can get me in.
Yeah.
And I'm not greedy. I'm not going to steal what you've got so far, but for the rest of the journey where you find something, I want my share.
Yeah.
So it's not an unreasonable request. It's just, you know, that
I'm not
he's trying
asking
to
for
get-
what's not mine. I'm just asking for what is mine.
And the whole scene that follows, when they're, you know, you just realize, like, oh my God, I'm at a campfire deciding whether or not we're going to kill someone or not, and that's a real decision that needs to be made, and that they all, you know, two reluctantly, and one just vehemently just saying like, no, we
have to do this.
Right.
This is what we have to do to survive. And it's like, you need to calm down, buddy. Chill.
I also like, there's a little moment where, and I know that this probably came from John Huston from just having served in the war, but that Walter Huston is almost like he knows this isn't the first person that he's had to kill.
Right.
Right. But he knows what comes with the weight that comes with having killed somebody.
Right.
So there's just this little moment where you know that that's what he's thinking as he's picking up the gun. And it's like, all right, I guess I gotta do this again.
Yeah.
And him not being able to communicate that with the other two that clearly have not ever killed a person.
Yeah. That's the wise old mentor character of just like, well, I mean, if this is what you guys want to do, but there's really no coming back from it, it changes you. Knowing that Dobbs was such an inspiration for Indiana Jones, by the end of the film, I wondered how much Howard was an inspiration for Henry Jones in Last Crusade. And they have similar look. They're both very, studious and fatherly and all that kind of stuff. But that scene where he's riding off with the villagers to go back, I was just like, this feels like the end of Last Crusade. Where it's just like, well, I've changed. This is who I am now. My motivations are all different.
I'm sure it was on his mind.
Of course, because it's Spielberg. And he just steals from other people because he's great at it. What else do I have here? This film won 3 Academy Awards that year. Best Director, Best Adapted Screenplay, both for Huston, and Best Supporting Actor for his Pops. And it was the first time a father and son won Academy Awards, and they only lost Best Picture to Laurence Olivier's Hamlet, which is like, okay. All right, if you're going to lose one, might as well be Olivier's Hamlet.
And it's just such a shame that Bogart didn't win, because it is such a...
He's fantastic.
I mean, he's just amazing.
And it's the question of, the thing about the Academy Awards, is it that you win Best Actor or that they decide to give it to you that year? He is fantastic in this film. He's got better roles, but he is fantastic in this film. At this point in his life, he was losing his hair because he was taking hormone treatments to try to have children with the beautiful Lauren Bacall. Wow. And it also was exacerbated by his heavy drinking, and he was vitamin V deficient. So then he started taking the hormones and taking the B vitamins, and his hair started to grow back a little bit, but it was still thin enough that he wears a wig in this film. And you can see that bad boy. That's some later James Bond, Sean Connery bad toupee action going on in there, particularly in the scenes with him and Curtains when they end up drawing on each other and saying, all right, well, I bet you $105,000 that you fall asleep before I do. And then later when he's alone and he's taking the mules down and he finds the watering hole and he wets his hair and you're like, well, that's not real.
Right.
That looks bad.
Right.
But I mean, you're a Hollywood superstar. You got to keep your hair. You can't go bald. Not in the 40s.
There's one thing I wanted to talk about in regards to this movie where, it's a shame because it's, two dudes talking about this. But this movie kind of shares something similar, a similar critique that fell upon, There Will Be Blood. Also, like movies like Stalag 17 or The Dirty Dozen, where it's like there's no real female representation in the film.
Yeah.
And the female characters that you can point to are very slight. Like they're not.
One's a harlot. One is a attendant to Howard when he's in the village, kind of thing. Right. And that's about it.
Right. And I always, of course, I hear the criticism and there's no reason why there couldn't be a female in the film.
Sure.
I guess, but almost like, I guess it would be a little. It's two things, like this is about the worst sides of man,
really, and
Yeah.
the worst sides of our nature. So, you know, maybe it is appropriate that there's no female representation.
Yeah.
And if there would be a female representation, it would just be, you know, she would have to supply the goodness or the purity
Right.
of human nature.
But then is that sexist?
Right.
To then just be like, well, then you're just making her a nice
Right.
lady.
It's a
like,
little
well, I don't
on
know.
the nose.
Yeah, exactly. Because I'm trying to think if you could gender blind cast this, and I don't know that it would work because of the inherent evil in man. That, I mean, it's always so tricky because it's like, do you want to say there's inherent evil in woman too?
Right.
Wouldn't that then be a sexist commentary as well? Of like, oh well, she just got mad at blah blah blah, and it's like I don't know what to want to do.
Right.
I don't know how to win that.
Right. And
I think
feel
that it works perfectly for the time period, for the roles that they're playing, that they are three men, because also, unfortunately, if either Dobbs or Curtins had been a woman at that time and been that down on their luck,
Yeah.
they probably would have had to turn to sex work.
Right.
And that's a different story.
Right.
And that's a different movie, and that's all different. And, unfortunately, a female character of Howard wouldn't be respected at that time period.
Right.
So it's just it's a losing battle.
Right. And I almost feel like the Howard Hawks version of this movie is Curtins would be a female character, and it would be the Hawks female character.
it would be
of,
Hepburn.
You know, there's no reason why I, a woman, cannot be in this party going
Right.
to get the gold.
Right.
And there would be
And that would be the
banter between
conversation.
them. Yeah.
You couldn't do it without that conversation. You couldn't just have a female character for the sake of, well, we're friends, we're partners, this is what we do. There would have to be some commentary throughout the film of, you know, the song from Annie, Get Your Gun, anything you can do, I can do better.
Right.
And is that the story you want to tell? Is that the original story from the novel? No.
Right.
It's a slippery slope.
It is.
It's tricky.
But I mean, that is not to say that I feel like there's anything wrong with this film, even with that.
No.
You know, I think it, you know, for what it wants to say, and for what it wants to achieve, I think it does it
Yeah.
wonderfully.
It's got excellent commentary on so many different things, from different classes to, you know, I applaud the film for the way that it portrays the Mexicans in the film, because there are federales, there are bandits, there are simple villagers, and then there are the even more rural, insulated villagers. And none of them are painted in a bad light in any way. Even the bandits, you're like, well, they're bandits.
Right.
There's nothing stereotypical about them. There's nothing overly negative. It's just, well, these are bad guys. These are evil men doing evil things.
Right. And it's also like it follows the same structure and the same, you know, what it's trying to say about these three characters. It's like they're just doing what they need to do to survive, what they need to do to live, and to try to get a better life.
Yeah.
That's what the bandits are doing. That's what the little kid is doing, selling the tickets. Like, you get that throughout the whole thing. The only character that is well off in the film is John Huston's character.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And that in and of itself is kind of a commentary.
Right.
Of, well, what are these Americans doing coming down here and just throwing their money around? And it's not to say that that's like a good thing or to be aspired to or anything like that. It's just like, why are you here? And for Bogart to mark him as an American and always use that as his thing, it's like, would you help a fellow American out? It's like, well, I can, but without me, what else are you going to be doing?
Right.
You have to figure it out on your own. You can't just keep coming to me for charity. And I'm glad that he has that line. He's like, this is the last one. Don't bother me anymore. Do it for yourself. There's something about that specifically that I wanted to touch on, and I will come back to it because I cannot remember now.
There's one of the times that he asked the money, he's getting his shoe shined. And you get the sense that, like, the American character who is just reaping the benefits of the land, but not giving anything back necessarily. There's a little bit of that in there, and you get that throughout the whole. That's part of Bogart's character.
Yeah. There's a lot of trivia from this movie.
Yeah.
I was really impressed. The thing that stuck out to me most, and I had no idea that this was even a thing, the badges line. I thought that was purely from Blazing Saddles. I didn't know it was a reference to this. Badges? We don't need no stinking badges. And I was like, wait. Oh, it's like when you learn a song that you love is actually a cover.
Right.
And then, oh, that's a Beatles song. And you're like, give me the original. Let me hear what it's supposed to sound like. I thought that was really kind of interesting. And as this was based on a novel, a lot of it had to be censored down for the Hays Code at the time. Even that one scene, there's a lot of swearing involved that was taken out because that wouldn't have worked. But probably the biggest censoring of this film is Dobbs' death, actually, specifically. In the book, he's decapitated, and then they kick his head, and like it rolls away. And it was originally shot that when Gold Hat is the bandit character's name, when he attacks him with the machete, he decapitates him with that first cut, and then his head rolls down the hill and into that watering hole. And they knew that was never going to pass, so Huston just does a trick where he does the chop, and then he does the chop exactly again, and he just repeated that footage. So it looks like he does the chop and then just does the second one for the killing blow. But then in the next shot, when we reverse around, you see one of the other bandits reacting to the head falling in the water, but you don't see it, and you can also see the ripples from it splashing in but not happening. And Bogart had a very funny response to that, if I can find it. He said, "What's wrong with seeing a guy getting his head cut off?" Well, there's quite a bit there, Bogey.
If only he lived now.
I know. Jeez, look at The Walking Dead. He'd be in hog heaven. Speaking of Bogart, he said of working with both of the Hustons, he said one Huston is bad enough, but two are murder. John Huston persuaded his father to do the role without his dentures, so we get that kind of whistly, prospectory kind of sound from him. The author of the book was a recluse named simply B. Travin, and Huston read the novel, wrote to him and said, "I'd like, permission to make this into a movie." He gave him permission. He did all of this via letter. And then when they went down to actually shoot the film, Huston invited him to set. And he goes, "Oh, no, but I will send an associate named Hal Croves." And everyone was convinced that Hal Croves was actually Travin. He never admitted it, but I read that he frequently would use the wrong pronoun and say I instead of he, talking about Travin. But he served as the technical director and the translator on the film. And after a while, everybody was just like, well, "Yeah, that's him. You're not fooling anybody." John Huston had an adverse reaction to smoking marijuana for the first time while making this film, and he was smoking it with his father, which I thought was fun. The on-set doctor actually had to take care of him because he had such a bad reaction. Wow. This I thought was crazy, mostly because I read it and I was like, "Oh, that sucks." And then I read more about it, and I was like, "Wait, what?" So production was shut down shortly after it began, after newspapers in the area wrote a false story saying that the film was unflattering to Mexico. So then the authorities were like, "Well, no, then you can't film her anymore." And associates of Huston went and spoke to the president of Mexico. Can't get any higher than that. And convinced him that the film was not unfavorable. It was very flattering to Mexico, blah, blah, And later, the editor from that newspaper was murdered by a jealous husband with whom he was having an affair with that man's wife.
Jeez.
Which is like, what? How can that be the ending of that story? That's
Right.
so crazy. Also, apparently, it was common to just bribe newspapers at that point to get the story that you wanted, and they hadn't done that. So he was like, well, fine, then I'm going to get your movie shut down. But then he's later murdered. So there's that.
Wow. I just had this thought. I think this is true. So the Mexicans in the film are played by Mexican actors.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
atypical for 1948.
Absolutely atypical, yeah. Look at Touch of Evil.
Right.
He is not a Mexican man. Around this time, leading up to it, there was a yacht race from Catalina Island to Hawaii called the Honolulu Classic. And Bogart was an avid yachtsman. And this was supposed to be a very short shoot. It ended up being 59 days. 5.5 months, excuse me, and 29 days over schedule. So as they got closer and closer, Bogart kept bothering John Huston, being like, "Are we going to get this done? I want to go to this thing. Are we going to get this done?" To the point where John Huston got so mad, he grabbed Bogart by the nose and twisted. And Bogart never said a thing about it again. It was just like, that's what you have to do to get Bogart to leave you alone, is treat him like a child, which says a lot about being a star at that time. Mm-hmm. You mentioned the fight scene in the bar. That actually took 5 days to shoot.
Wow.
Which makes sense because you have a lot of different angles in there. You have low angles, you have high angles, you have reaction shots, and you have, you know, all these haymakers being thrown. It's such a violent fight that, especially considering at least the executives at Warner Brothers thought this was just going to be a B-movie Western.
Right.
That's certainly not B-movie. B-movie is one punch and the hero wins, Indiana Jones style.
Right.
This went on for a while, and there are times when it's like, these guys might not win.
Can you imagine filming one sequence in 5 days?
I would lose my mind.
And that it's not even... It's like within the first 10 minutes in the movie, it's not like it's like your big climactic
Yeah, this is
thing.
just a fist fight in a bar. To which I'm sure the actors were like, why are we still doing this? How do you not have this yet? And, you know, I can sometimes be kind of bratty as an actor on set of like, I feel like we have this. I feel like we have this, and second guessing what's happening. But I mean, if it's John Huston, I'm like, okay, whatever you need, dude.
Mm-hmm.
I am in your movie. I am happy about that. This film was a major influence for Sam Peckinpah, obviously. Mm-hmm. We mentioned a bunch of other people too, but that one was the one that stuck out to me as like, oh yeah, the Dirty Dozen, Magnificent Seven, all of that stuff. You can definitely see that. Also a big influence on Breaking Bad. Vince Gilligan said that Dobbs was a major influence on the creation and growth of Walter White. So much so that there's like an homage scene in one of the episodes to this film.
Yep. You can totally see that.
You read that and you're like, yes, of course,
Mm-hmm.
because we have Walter White, who starts out, you know, down on his luck and unassuming, and like, I'm desperate, I'll do whatever I need to, and then he just gets more and more and more power and more paranoid about the people around him, and it's his downfall.
You know, I know Vince Gilligan doesn't need to do anything else to prove himself, but I really would love for him to make a movie.
Right?
Because
He needs to.
I mean, he's just like he talks about this film. He talks about The Searchers and The Third Man and Red River as being influences on Breaking Bad, and it's like, oh man, if you ever
Just make a Western.
yeah,
It doesn't even have to be like an old Western, like a modern Western. Put Jeff Bridges in it, and
there you go.
it's going to be great. A little Sam Elliott in there for flavor. Let's see. Oh, the actor who played Cody, Bruce Bennett, lived to be 100 years old.
Wow.
I thought that was pretty fantastic. And we already talked about John Huston playing the tourist in there.
That was excuse me. There's a Bugs Bunny cartoon.
It's on the DVD.
Yeah.
I didn't get to watch it.
But
That's how you know that you have influence, when animated series are aping you
mm-hmm.
and exposing what you've done to a younger generation. It's like putting Wagner in Looney Tunes too, because then you hear Flight of the Valkyries, And you're like, oh, that's the thing from Bugs Bunny. And then you're like, no, 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 it's actually this.
Right.
It's like the covers thing that I mentioned before. When was the first time you saw it? We totally skipped that over at the beginning of the film, or the episode.
It was in high school because during the AFI thing, when Spielberg said that about those two films, you know, I had to watch it. And it became one of those films where it's like, here's an old film that I should watch just to say that I've seen it.
Totally.
But then you see it and you're like, wow.
Yeah.
Of course, this is a classic film that you should watch. And then, you know, it just became one of those movies that I like to watch. Like, you know, I can never get sick of it.
Yeah.
Like every year I have to watch it. If, you know, it's notorious when during Thanksgiving, when my parents come up and we have Thanksgiving dinner, like I use that day as a playlist for movies. And this tends to kind of get thrown
Find
in
its
there.
way in there somewhere. Watching it, I want to see it on a big screen, because I bet that, I mean, the DVD transfer isn't amazing. Like, you can see a lot of grain in some of the scenes. But at the same time, imagine this on like a Saturday afternoon in a theater with just popcorn and just like, this is so fun.
And I think they just did a 2K transfer because this was one of the Fathom events.
Oh, nice.
It was either last month or the month before.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would be great.
And this is a perfect Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon movie to watch too. It's just like, let's just sit on the couch and watch this. Because it's not a Western. Like, I was explaining the plot to Rachel after it was done, and she's like, wow, I didn't think that that's what it was. And I was like, I didn't either.
Right.
I thought it was guys treasure hunting.
And it's almost like it's one of those great movies where it's kind of genreless.
Yeah.
In a way, because you could.
Wikipedia has a crazy description of like a American adventure neo-Western thriller or something. And I was like, that's a lot of things, but yeah, that's kind of apt.
You could hear arguments that it is a Western.
Right.
You could hear arguments that it's an adventure film. And you could hear arguments that it's a noir thriller. Like it's got so much going on, and tells such a simple yet grand story. It's a morality tale. You know, it's one of those great kind of chamber. You could feel like this being like, if it was a play, it would be like a chamber piece. But it's one of the great morality tales of classic cinema.
Yeah. Now, just going back to the cinematography of shooting on location the way that they do, the scene where Bogart's losing it after he's shot curtains, and he's just going back and forth, just the way that the camera is able to move through the scenery so seamlessly.
Yep.
Because he thinks he's killed him, and he's like, oh, I'm just going to go to sleep. And then the next day, he's taking the mules down a little bit, and it's like, oh wait, what was that? And he runs up with the shovel, and he's not there anymore. But then he's going from like point A to point B to point C to back and back and back, and he's falling further and further into paranoia and insanity. And the camera's just tracking right along with him, completely seamlessly, like it's on a track, like it's in a studio. And he has complete control of everything that he's doing, from the lighting to everything. And that's out in the wilderness somewhere. That's on a mountain in Mexico.
And it's so great that if you look at the, you know, with directors like John Huston and Howard Hawks and John Ford, like if you look at the cutting styles and they just film what they need to film, and they tell the story as simply as possible.
Yeah.
And if you like break it down, you're like, okay, if you were given that scene, you know, what would you want to do?
Right.
And sometimes like I would sit down and it's like, you know, oh my God, I want the camera to do this and all this fancy stuff.
Yeah.
But then that's just all bull crap anyway. And
Yeah.
it's just shoot the thing.
Just shoot it. Because, yeah, you're right. You could very easily, like, intercut all these like dramatic angles and responses and everything else. But it's so much more effective to just watch this man stumble around through his own madness, and you're just like, oh, man, he has lost it. And then he starts maniacally laughing, and you're like, wow, gone.
Right.
This guy is out to lunch.
And I also think like with direction like that and with filmmaking like that, you're telling the actor, I trust you to give the performance that's going to tell the story just as well as if I was doing something fancy with the camera. And that gives the kind of the trust back and forth between the actor and the director of just like, no, I'm just gonna, you know, I'm gonna dolly back and forth and follow you, but what you're gonna be doing
That's on
is
you.
just as important.
Yeah. It reminds me of that scene from Apocalypse Now we talked about last week with Martin Sheen in the mirror. And it's just roll camera, just let it happen. Just do what you need to do for the process, and I'll tell you when it's not working.
Right.
You go, you do as much as you want, and I'm here to rein you in if need be. And I've always loved those directors too, who are just like, bigger, 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 bigger. I will tell you when it's too big and when it's too much. And as the actor, you're like, this has to be too much. And then you watch it and you're like, that was good. That was great. And it reminds me of the Malik scene in Northland, where I'm like, this can't be good. I am doing way too much right now. And then I watch it and I'm like,
Wow.
that's pretty good. I mean, this is a complete humble brag, but watching that scene the first time when it was over, I was a little bit like misty-eyed because I was like, I didn't feel like I was even watching myself. I don't know how that relates to Treasure of the Sierra Madre, but
Right.
I thought of it.
Well, and you mean your first scene?
With Baxter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, like it's just
Set
like
up
I
the
could
camera.
have gone just one shot, man.
And
like,
I
it's
didn't
just-
realize until the scene was like halfway in that you hadn't cut. And it's the same thing of just like, I'm getting what I need right here. You could have reverse shot it, and you're like, nope, that's what I needed, and you got it. So in a way, you're like John Huston.
Oh my God. No.
Yes, it's true.
I tell you, it is really, really awesome. I have this, of course, I'm a nerd about these types of things, but
You guys should have seen the text message he sent me over the weekend about lenses and filters that he got. I just showed it to Rachel, and I was like, this guy, what a nerd.
I have this new game that I play now that I watch the movie and I'm like, ooh, what lens is that? I'm going to guess the lens.
I do that with voiceover actors. For commercials and stuff, I'm like, oh, hey, John Hamm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But no, it's really great to watch a movie like this where it is just bare bones filmmaking. I'm telling a story about three guys that go searching for gold in Mexico. I've got my crew, I'm going to Mexico, I'm gonna shoot this whole thing on location, and I'm just, the camera setups are gonna be simple, but what is happening on the screen is gonna be deep and crazy, and I'm gonna deal with the dark sides of human nature and show an A-list star lose his mind.
Yeah. And that is huge for 1948. You don't see that anywhere else.
No.
And that's kind of awesome. Just the trust that they all had in each other that this was going to work, especially with Jack Warner or whichever Warner it was, losing his damn mind because it was so far over budget and it was so over schedule, and he's looking at the dailies and it's just, I read one that there's a sequence where they're looking for something. I can't remember the specifics of it because I read the IMDb while I'm watching the movie, so a lot of times I haven't come to what they're talking about yet, and I just kind of gloss over it because I'm like, well, that seems like a spoiler. Like I saw that Dobbs was killed, and I was like, oh, crap. But at one point during the screening of it, he just jumped up and he yelled, if he doesn't get there sooner, I'm shutting this picture down because we're just wasting too much money. And it was just like this somewhat dramatic moment in the film, and he's like, it's taking too long. This is all taking too long.
Is that when the bandits are coming and they're getting ready for the
It must
fight?
have been.
Yeah.
I forget which one it was, but I was just like, wow, that's the producer just freaking out. Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I don't think I can't. You can't get any more entertaining than this movie.
It's in knowing that it influenced so many films that I love, like Indiana Jones. I mean, Temple of Doom is this movie. It's Fortune and Glory, kid. He gets the stones. He has them. But then in the end of the film, that's not what he's supposed to get.
Right.
And that's why he loses them. And they lose the gold, and they lose everything. But what they've learned is that Howard wants to go be this new person. And Curtins takes it as the opportunity to go be another person. And Dobbs loses everything.
I guess that's the best thing that I can say about this movie and why people should watch it is if a movie can influence Bugs Bunny, Raiders of the Lost Ark, There Will Be Blood, and Apocalypse Now, I think it's a pretty good movie.
You're probably doing something right. Good job, John Huston. You nailed it. You got it. Proud of you. Cool. Well, aside from just gushing about the movie, I don't know that we have much more that we can say other than watch it.
I'm glad you like it.
It's so good.
One of the great American films.
Yeah. It's a little over 2 hours, and by little I mean like I think 2 hours and 2 minutes or something like that, so it's not a slog or anything. And like we say, they get the gold so fast. So then it's just like, well, what now?
Right.
What do we do? And knowing that makes the latter part of the film so much more exciting because it is the unknown. Like if we have the treasure map, we have the road map of we're going to go up this mountain, we're going to find gold. Hey, we found gold. Now what do we do? And then it's unknown. And then you don't have the map anymore.
Right.
And that's when things get fun.
And if you are, just from a filmmaking standpoint, I mean, if you're watching it as a cinematographer, if you're watching it as a director, if you're watching it as a screenwriter, or even as an actor or an actress, it's like, you can pull something from this movie.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cool. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. What do we have next week?
Oh my God, next week we're doing Close Encounters of the Third Kind. You're going to be watching it for the first time.
I know.
I already told Rachel, I'm like, geez, just,
turn off the lights,
turn everything
the
off, make it a
lights
moment
and
for
candles,
him.
Get the cats in the laps and let's do this. Rachel will be on with us for that episode as
Perfect.
well. And I am super duper excited. Thank you to the folks who came out to the screening of Wizard of Oz.
Yeah. Oh my God, did it look gorgeous.
He sent me a picture and I was like,
why aren't I here? But no, it was a beautiful, beautiful transfer. All the people that showed up, there were some kids there, that was heartwarming.
Nice.
And it was nice to watch a big, classic, popular film like that on the big screen with a bunch of people.
How they should be viewed. Go to the theater, everybody. See movies in the theater. Cool. All right, well, thank you, David. Thank you for this movie. This was a lot of fun, and I can't wait for Close Encounters next week. So until then, I'm Lincoln L. Hayes.
I'm David Metzger.
Go watch a movie, guys.